Depeche Mode's 1990 album Violator was a band finding a focused and refined sound, building on their previous success and creating anthems that still resonate today. Songs like Personal Jesus and Enjoy the Silence have endured as timeless classics and an incredible example of perfectly crafted pop songs with a sophistication that are a lesson in songwriting, arrangement and production. The band were one of the main electronic music innovators when they introduced their fresh take on pop early in the 80s. Back then, arrangements based around synthesizers and drum machines was a fringe concept. By the end of the 80s, it was commonplace, with producers like Stock Aitken and Waterman churning out mass-produced electronic pop music by the tonload. Despite this now over-familiarity with electronic instruments, Depeche managed to still sound fresh with Violator. Great songwriting was coupled with attention to detail and measured choices and placement of sounds that gives the album a timeless feel, raising it above so many other electronic-based acts of the day. To assist the band with the production on this album, they asked Mark Ellis, who is better known as Flood. Flood was a fan of the band and very keen to work with them, believing that their musical sensibilities would align. Normally pre-production for the band would be a lengthy affair taking many months, but for Violator, they decided to hasten this approach. Alan Wilder said, "Usually we begin with the making of the record by having extensive pre-production meetings where we decide what the record will actually sound like, then go into a programming studio. This time we decided to keep all pre-production work to a minimum. We were beginning to have a problem with boredom, in that we felt we'd reached a certain level of achievement in doing things a certain way." Martin Gore added, "Over the last 5 years, I think we'd perfected a formula. My demos, a month in a programming studio, etc, etc. We decided that our first record of the 90s ought to be different. This meant that the demos they created were also more open to interpretation, as opposed to almost finished tracks that just needed a few studio overdubs until completion. Gore in particular had been guilty of this, and Wilder was much happier to be let in on influencing the direction of his songs. This was also great for Flood, who was able to contribute ideas crucial to the development of the material. Although he was brought in to influence their sound and provide direction, he recalls that at the time, Depeche were a very close-knit band, and you had to work hard to get heard with an opinion. A good example of this was the song Enjoy the Silence. The original demo created by Martin Gore was a slow-tempo ballad, and nothing like the hit it became.
Words like violence break the silence, come crashing into my little world, painful to...
Martin was reluctant to try anything until Flood, led by Alan Wilder, began creating the backing track, at which stage Martin did start to contribute, even though he was still not convinced.
Got this sort of vague idea about making it a fast, almost dance track. What do you think? And there was an initial resistance to it. I think Martin wasn't too keen.
The song was called Enjoy the Silence, and, that seemed to be in total contrast with a disco track.
But they did, and then we came back in and Flood got Martin to play this guitar line, which ended up being the line on the song, and it inspired me to sort of go in and sing over it to this beat.
Within an hour, we knew we had a massive hit.
The song and production is a masterpiece in my opinion, and is a great example of every part in the arrangement being considered and crucial to the overall sound. From the expertly programmed bass line from Flood's Roland 700 modular system, to the guitars, synths and sample layers. Flood also mixed Enjoy the Silence, but the rest of the album was in the hands of Francois Kevorkian. Francois was known to be extremely meticulous when it came to the finer details of the recording. Flood said that it wouldn't be uncommon for him to spend a whole day on hi-hats.
Francois was so pedantic with absolutely everything that he did, that he would often disappear, in the studio. He'd be off in the corner somewhere with a pair of headphones on for 2 days working on a hi-hat, and at times that was very frustrating and very, very boring because we couldn't even hear what he was doing. But we knew that when we actually heard what he'd done to the hi-hat over those 2 days, we could see the value of it.
Martin's guitar used on the song's riff was the Gretsch 6118 double anniversary. It's a great choice to add weight against the backdrop of drum machines and synthesizers. The guitar not only added sonic textures, but also took more of a lead role in the initial songwriting, which noticeably influenced the final result. Another clear standout track on the album that was guitar-driven, Personal Jesus, was actually released months before the album hit the shelves. The 12-inch version of the record went on to sell 1 million copies in the US, making it a phenomenal success, and importantly, announcing the band's new sound. It was recorded during the first sessions at Logic Studios in Milan. The drive-in rhythm section was made using samples of feet stomping on flight cases, blended with electronic snare and tom sounds. Flood remembers how the percussive vocal sound came about. The breath came about as an accident, as they were trying to record a harmonica to use as a bass part, but the sound just wasn't right. But what we did like was the sound of someone going, huh. So we got a load of huh from Martin Gore, and I think Alan Wilder as well, and then chucked them all together, and that makes up the whole part. And that was all from trying to get a harmonica for a bass sound. Some of the key electronic instruments used on the album included the EMS VCS3, the Mini Moog, the Emulator 2, the Oberheim OB8 and Flood's own ARP 2600, which can be heard in the sequence riff of Waiting for the Night. They also used many samples from far-reaching sources, from the Bulgarian state female choir's recording of The Bleeding Lamb, that formed part of the R sound on Enjoy the Silence, to a piece of Fad Gadget's Fireside Favourites on Personal Jesus, and even a Tone Loc drum sample on Halo. All the main recording sessions took place at Puck Studios in Denmark, with the band finishing up in January 1990. As already mentioned, Personal Jesus was released months before in August '89 to an enthusiastic reception by their eager US fans, so anticipation was already sky high. This was then followed by the release of Enjoy the Silence in February, before finally, the fans got their hands on the album itself in March. It was of course an undoubted success, with the fans and critics alike.
It took 10 years and 22 singles, but Depeche Mode is now the word in the music called progressive techno-pop. Tonight, the band is appearing in person for an autograph party at a West LA record store. And it has attracted thousands of fans waiting to see their music idols, some who have been lined up since last night.
You could hear the screaming all over the Beverly Center area, a line of teenagers 15 blocks long. Like the swooning over Sinatra, the ecstasy over Elvis, and the fainting over the Fab Four, Depeche Mode is today's hot act.
The NME in the UK praised its sparse, clinical sonic style and personal lyrics that drew you into the songs. It's been said that the album has aged with consummate grace, and I think this is a great way of describing its legacy.